This is Keith Hooper. What you're going to see on this video is Dr. Gutman giving a presentation to the people over in Europe, in the UK and Ireland, and regarding glutathione and cancer. Some incredible information. Sometimes you wonder, why do you do these things, Keith? Why do you want to know about this? Why do I want you to know about this? This is what Dr. Gutman is going to share with you. Pay close attention. See you after the video.
For one, we have Dr. Jeffrey McTavish, who is a gold consultant from the UK, has been a chiropractic doctor for over 24 years, and he runs his own practice for the most of it. He's got a postgraduate in functional neurology, applied kinesiology, and he's currently studying functional medicine. The other probably doesn't need as much of an invitation and introduction, and that's Dr. Jimmy Gutman, who's the chairman of the Scientific Advisory Board, multiple book author, and as Dr. Jeffrey has already mentioned, there is a 5th edition of the glutathione book, which you can now find, and I'd advise all of you to get out there if you want to learn a lot more about glutathione, which is something that we all need to do. But that's all from me. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to give the floor over to Dr. Jeffrey and Dr. Jimmy, and they'll be able to talk to you, and I'll be monitoring the admin from my side. So thank you so much. All the best to you all.
Thank you, Raz, and thank you for that great introduction. And thank you all for being here. We're gonna get into a very interesting topic and hopefully have some fun with it. So I'm assuming you can see this screen, and we're going to be looking at cancer and glutathione. This is a very hot topic and certainly has its controversy, which you'll be seeing in the next few minutes.
So there seems to be a lot written about glutathione and cancer. What does the literature have to say about this relationship?
Well, I congratulate you for having the courage to bring up one of the most controversial areas about the application of glutathione in taking care of our health. As you can see from the slide here, this is an area that's drawn an incredible amount of interest, almost 30,000 articles on PubMed. For those of you who don't know what PubMed is, it's an open site available to everybody. And it is the largest repository of research articles that you could find online. Any researcher, most clinicians, will visit PubMed. I'm on PubMed on a daily basis. So if you're looking for any original articles, you'll find it there. And the reason I say that this is controversial is that there are very distinct and differing opinions on how to approach glutathione and cancer. At the very least, let me say that the literature can be pretty confusing. Let me start off by saying this. It's quite clear and agreed upon that people with low glutathione levels are at significantly higher risk for the development of cancer. And this has been shown by several methods, not just measuring glutathione levels, but more recently because of our ability to look at the human genome and determine DNA coding. Well, these studies which look at individuals who have abnormal glutathione genes show them to be particularly susceptible to cancer. This is very revealing. And what makes this situation even worse is that cancer itself will further lower glutathione levels throughout the body. So study after study shows that total body glutathione is lower in cancer patients than in the healthier population. This makes the patient's defenses even weaker. And this is further demonstrated by the strong evidence that cancer patients with higher glutathione levels have far fewer negative side effects from their chemotherapy and radiotherapy. In other words, higher glutathione levels improves the tolerability of treatment, of which you are all aware is often as unpleasant as the disease itself.
Sorry. I've seen a lot of studies that have demonstrated that glutathione levels in cancer cells are actually higher than normal. And this is the tricky one because it does confuse people. So somehow that seems counterintuitive to what information Dr. Jimmy just showed you. So let's comment on it and have a wee little conversation about that, because this is an important point, actually, Jimmy.
Absolutely, Dr. McTavish. As we mentioned, this is one of the most challenging areas that we need to talk about. And here is the major reason for the confusion in the literature. When you measure glutathione levels in most solid human tumors, you find that these cancer cells are actually high in glutathione. Like you mentioned, Jeffrey, that is interesting. And that can lead us to coming up with contradictory conclusions. Let me explain and pay attention. You need to kind of wrap your head around this. For example, because these cancer cells are high in glutathione, the cancer cells themselves use this extra glutathione to protect themselves from the chemo or radiotherapy. In fact, this has been used to explain the resistance to treatment that certain cases have. And this has led to a lot of research where cancer cells grown outside of the body in what we call a cell culture, and experiments are done on these cancer cells themselves. And what has raised a lot of attention is that if you can deplete glutathione levels inside these cancer cells, you can make them more susceptible to damage by chemotherapy.
That's an interesting slide, and I want to comment on one little word in that last one, because I think it's really important because it's such a new topic that we need to really just be aware of. So again, this seems to argue in favor of lowering glutathione in patients and not raising glutathione. So why are we not just lowering glutathione levels in cancer patients? Good question.
It is a good question. It's a critical question. And this is a key question that's been addressed in many clinical trials. And this is why we need to make any major decisions on treatment methods based on human trials. I say this again and again. Laboratory studies and animal studies are important to our understanding, and cell cultures are important. But when you take these experiments into a human study, so often we're surprised at the outcome in the real world. And this is important. When you lower glutathione levels in patients before chemotherapy or radiotherapy, you find that the side effects of the treatment are so severe that the approach becomes impractical, and unfortunately even results in death of some of the patients. And scientists are still trying to find a way to do this, so far with little success.
Absolutely. So that we have to ask that question again. So if raising glutathione levels in oncology is a good idea, or is it a bad idea? And again, it's interdependent on, and each patient will have a different story. Jimmy.
Yes, indeed. Well, I have to think that most well-read people would not argue too much with raising glutathione in patients who are not undergoing chemo or radiotherapy. Again, please, you need to ask your own oncologist his or her opinion on this before you use any supplements. But and listen to your doctor before you listen to something that you find online.
So what about if raising glutathione levels for patients who are receiving chemo or radiotherapy, is this a good thing, a bad thing? What's your opinion on that, Dr. Jimmy?
This is what really needs a closer look. Here is what I've been proposing to doctors and scientists for a long time. And I have to tell you, this has been a long and difficult argument. You need to start by looking at all the available literature and trying hard not to cherry pick the articles that only support your point of view. So I welcome all of you to do this yourself, especially the doctors. Always do your own homework. And you'll find that the vast majority of the successful studies looking at lowering glutathione before chemotherapy have been done in tissue cultures or test tube studies and not in live humans. And I say vast majority, actually, I've not found any that have been useful enough to consider using as a clinical intervention. So if any of you find one, please send it to me. I have not in 25 years found one. And just as importantly, I've not found a single article where raising glutathione levels in human cancer patients have backfired. Not a one. So if you come across one, again, I need to know. And so send it to me. And to make my life easier, because I was spending so much time answering this question again and again, I wrote this article. It essentially summarizes what we just spoke about, but in much more detail and with dozens of references. Please, feel free to read this if you want a deeper understanding, and we'll try and make this easily available to you.
Okay, so raising glutathione levels in humans can improve outcome of chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And I have got some people who have had this. And some people will say, well, how does it work, Dr. Jimmy?
Here's where it is going to get a little bit technical. We need to look at some of the biochemistry about how glutathione is manufactured in the cell. So I guess not everybody will get this right away, but again, we're recording this, so you'll be able to look at these slides and at a slower pace. I'm not going to go through this whole pathway, but it's important to note that there are many steps for a cell to take to make its own glutathione. And if we narrow down tightly into one spot in this diagram, we can see that the amount of glutathione that can be made by a cell has a certain limit. See, you can't force a normal cell to make more than its optimal glutathione levels. But because you see, when you reach a certain ceiling of glutathione concentration, it will act to down-regulate production or slow down further production. And in this matter, a cell will make a pre-programmed amount of glutathione and no more, because cancer cells have super high levels of glutathione. It takes only a little bit of glutathione precursors to shut down production through what we call negative feedback inhibition. The first step was to show this in cell cultures, and we've done this. Immunotech scientists have done this years ago. Again, I won't bore you with the details, but here are some references to look up if you want to get deeper into this. Essentially, you see where levels drop at the end of these curves when glutathione precursors get too high in tumor cells. So forcing the precursors on a cancer cell will cause them to shut down production.
Interesting, isn't it? And so that we would call that selective modulation, and it seems to be a complicated term and can be misconstrued in various ways. So give us a Scooby about how we can simplify this, Dr. Jimmy.
Yes, for sure, Jeffrey. It is a little bit complication, and let's take a crack at it. So I tend to be more visual. So let's look at a visual model. Here we see a bunch of glutathione precursors. Note that I've labeled some of the CY for cysteine. This is the limiting amino acid, and this is the main thrust of the success of Immunical is a cysteine delivery vehicle. And more specifically, bonded or bioavailable cysteine. So these are glutathione precursors. These are used to make glutathione. Now, when these glutathione precursors are taken up by normal healthy cells, they're used effectively to raise glutathione. But when they get to the cancer cell, which already has super high levels of glutathione, they can cause the negative feedback mechanism to kick in, as we just saw. In simpler terms, the healthy cells start to produce glutathione, but the cancer cells is induced to make less glutathione. So effectively what happens, as you see, is a selective modulation of glutathione levels, so that glutathione levels climb in healthy cells, but drop in cancer cells. Ultimately, the result is that the healthy cells become more resistant to the damaging effects of the chemotherapy, but the cancer cells have less resistance, and so they can be damaged or die off quicker from chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So selective modulation, I hope it's a bit clearer now.
Very important. I think, before we answer this one question, is that the body is intelligent and it will know what to do when we give it the pieces of the puzzle to put together.
Yes,
So,
indeed.
Dr. Gutman, you always tell people to ask for others to show them the research to prove what they say. So clearly, I'm going to ask you to show the research. And has this been done?
Yes, Dr. McTavish, the bottom line, where show me the beef, show me the research. Yes. So what you're asking is what most people want to know. Show me the proof. So take a look at this. You may recognize some of the authors here, Dr. Bunos, Dr. Droge. Let's just read the title. Cysteine-rich protein, in this case, we're talking about Immunical, reverses. Now, please take note of this word, reverses weight loss in patients receiving chemotherapy or radiotherapy. This was the first study ever that showed a nutritional intervention. I'm not talking about drugs like anabolic steroids that actually reversed the muscle loss seen in end-stage cancer patients. Good nutrition could slow down the process, but not reverse it. This study meets all the criteria for what we call a gold standard study, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, and it took place in multiple excellent cancer stations across Canada. Initially, we wanted to look at both lung and colon cancer, but we didn't recruit enough bowel cancer patients, so we focused only on lung cancer. And it's important to note that in our inclusion criteria, now these patients had to already have shown signs of muscle loss. In other words, these were late-stage cancer patients by definition. Some of the easy, very objective measurements that were taken were body weight, cell mass, and hand strength. This is easy to do and accurate. But we also wanted to look at some quality of life measurements, which are really what counts more from the patient's perspective. And these are a little bit more subjective measurements. So we used a number of different measurement profiles, and you see them here. And here you go, a clear and significant increase in body weight and muscle mass. First time ever. And here you see that the patients themselves reported improvements in their quality of living. I mean, this alone is critical. And finally, the burning question, did these patients live longer? And let me just point out this group of numbers. A year after the study was completed, we went back to see who could report on their condition. Around 80% of the patients treated with Immunical were alive. Less than 50% of the patients who did not receive Immunical had passed away. These are very encouraging numbers, and I'm calling out for more studies to validate that. And there are more studies on the way. So let's summarize. Yes, we know that cancer cells are often found to be high in glutathione. In fact, it's this high level of cancer cells that may cause them to be resistant to treatment. When you grow these cancer cells outside of the body, then lower their glutathione levels, this makes them more susceptible to being damaged or killed by chemo and radiotherapy. However, when you do this in a living organism, like a human, this may lead to extremely high levels of adverse effects and even death. So this is, so far, has not turned out to be an effective strategy. And here's where our own scientists have added significantly to the research. Through the use of precursors, glutathione levels can be selectively modulated with really promising results. So thank you all for your attention, and thank you, Dr. McTavish, for your eloquent questions and insights. And there's another plug for my books. If you go to Amazon, you'll find the books, and you'll even find individual chapters available to you. Some of them are even for free.
Well, was that incredible? Great information. Once again, not everybody gets it. I understand that. But here's the facts. Immunical is the most unique nutritional product on the planet. It only works on smart people. Looking forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.